Death from the Stars by A. Rowley Hilliard, written in 1931. George Dixon is struggling wildly amidst a great conflagration. Fire burns his body, blazing before his eyes, roaring in his ears. For hours and hours he struggles, wondering why he has not been consumed. And then he awakens to the recognition of his own bedroom and the fact that he has been dreaming. But the burning feeling of his body does not cease, neither does the bright flashes of light before his eyes, the roaring in his ears, and these phenomena are 10 times stranger now than in a dream. His limbs twitch convulsively under the bedclothes. Must be sick, he thinks. Nerves a bit frazzled lately. Overworked, perhaps, but he hates to admit that. Can't give up work now. No, not now. He rolls over and groans. Rotten feeling. Feel better in the morning, most likely. Had to watch his little block. He was worried about it. It had been getting smaller right along and sort of crumbling. Yes, instead of growing, it was shrinking away, and he couldn't understand that. Couldn't see where it disappeared. For an hour he tosses uneasily on the bed. Although his bodily discomfort is steadily growing, it is not that which occupies his mind. He is worrying about his little block down in the laboratory. If he can make sure it is all right, he might get some sleep. He throws back the covers and swings his feet to the floor, stands up, uttering a low, startled cry as he sways dizzily and leans against the wall for support. Something pretty darned wrong, he says aloud. His voice sounds strange and high-pitched in his own ears. He finds the light switch. The journey down the stairs is long and terrible. He holds fast to the banisters, taking one step at a time. Ordinary muscular coordination seems to have deserted him. Each movement requires an effort of will. He cannot last long. Having gained the foot of the stairs, he staggers to the lab door on the right, bursts in, and switches on the light. There is a long moment of complete silence. Then he gives a hoarse cry. The laboratory is a large square room with long windows on 2 sides. Against the walls are set lead-topped tables littered with tubes, retorts, and various electrical devices. But it is towards the center of the room that George Dixon stares, wide-eyed. There, on a small table under a bell jar, reposes a little heap of black dust, nothing more. There is certainly nothing in the exhibit to astonish or terrify an ordinary observer. Yet George Dixon is both astonished and terrified, for he knows that only yesterday there had been under that jar a pretty fair-sized block composed of his life force, and now it was gone. Where? Things had to go somewhere, he tells himself. The jar was sealed tightly to the glass plate beneath, yet there remains only black dust, and George knows what that is. He lays his hand on the glass, warm but not hot. His eyes wander around the room, then become fixed upon a grotesque object on the window ledge. It was, or rather had been, his geranium plant, but now the leaves are dead black. As he watches, one of them drop off and crumbles to powder on the floor. George draws his hand across his eyes. Something is happening, something he cannot understand. He must try to think, but it is hard to think. His mind doesn't seem to work right, keeps wandering. He wishes Julius were here. Julius would help him. He stares at the geranium plant. Even the stalk is black. It is crumbling away, as his little block had crumbled. But that doesn't make it any easier. No, he can't think. If only Julius... He remembers the things Julius had said when they had last talked together. Julius had come to visit him, and had unusual occurrence, saying that he was interested in a proposed experiment George had mentioned in a letter. George had explained cautiously his intention to explore for life in substances deposited on Earth from outside. What is life? Julius had asked abruptly. George remembers laughing. Julius had a way of asking unanswerable questions. George had muttered something about assimilation. Life is a disease. Julius had a way of asking unanswerable questions and then answering them. Disease, George had explained. Exactly, a disease of corruption which afflicts the stagnant matter which is our Earth. This planet's matter is very low in energy. It is cooling, disintegrating, and you and I are the crawling, writhing maggots of its decay. Horrible and preposterous. Horrible, perhaps, but not preposterous. We say that life cannot exist under the sun. Why? Because the sun is too hot for it. What does that mean? Merely that the sun has a protective energy to purge or sterilize itself of such life as we represent. Place a needle point in a flame, as the doctor uses daily. There you have the same sort of sterilization on a small scale. The sun is too hot for life to live on it. George has been slightly indignant. You put a disagreeable interpretation on some well-known common facts. They may amuse you, Julius, but I fail to see how such speculations can have any practical value. They might serve as a warning to such as you. Warning? Yes, if I understand your motives correctly, you want to explore for life in meteoric substances. Since they consist of matter in a very low state of energy, and because mere cold is not always fatal to life, even as we know it, I fully believe that you will find what you are looking for. That is gratifying. It makes you practically unique among scientists. Julius had not appeared amused, but I am far from believing that you are wise in attempting it. When you find it, what then? What then? I don't understand you. Well, do you expect it to be identical with some form of life we experience on Earth? Not necessarily. Probably. No, I should say that the probability points in the other direction. Life is a product of its environment, and it would be a remarkable coincidence if the supposed new life had developed under conditions identical with those on Earth. It is my theory that some such life may exist in meteoric substances in a state of suspended animation, induced perhaps by lack of heat and most certainly by lack of food. To put it briefly, I intend to test for its presence with a variety of temperatures and a variety of foods. George remembers that Julius has nodded absently. There's been a strange look in his heavy eyes as he asks quietly, "And are you not afraid?" George shudders now as he lays back in his chair. He feels dizzy and sick. His body is numb with that helpless, prickly numbness one sometimes feels locally when his foot is asleep. Yes, he is afraid now, but then he has merely said, "Afraid? Afraid of what?" "Good Lord, man, don't you see it? You have just admitted that you expect this new life to be different from anything on Earth." "But I don't see why a mere difference—" Wait, let us go a little more deeply into this life as a disease idea. Not only is life as a whole a disease of matter, but each species of life is a disease to every other. The tubercular bacillus on the wall of your lung has no more personal animosity towards you than you had towards the duck you ate for dinner. It is merely living off its environment as you are. Obviously, mankind is as truly a disease of ducks as tuberculosis is of mankind. I see what you are driving at. You mean that any new life I might discover would automatically be hostile to many or all terrestrial species. Yet I see nothing terrifying in that. Man has certainly dealt with any number of hostile species during his existence. Man has dealt with nothing, Julius cuts in angrily. Man has been dealt with. You talk as if he had arrived at his present form by an act of will and fine determination. That is contrary to the first principles of evolutionary science. Man is a form of life that has been shaped by its enemies. Yet, even after millions of years of adaptation, he is not immune to attack by species which are a part of the very environment in which he has developed. And you propose to introduce something new? Good God. When angry, Julius was somewhat overbearing. George asks meekly, "Well then, would you advise me to give up the idea?" No. And am I your master? Do I do your thinking for you? Damn it, man, make up your own mind. I want to be sure you know what you're doing, that's all. There had never been any doubt in George's mind about what he was going to do. He made that clear. All right, do you have the meteorite? No, it is astonishingly difficult to get hold of one. So far I've had no luck at all. Julius draws a folded newspaper from his pocket and holds it out, indicating with his finger a paragraph. Strange theft in museum. An unidentified man visited the American Museum of Natural History late yesterday afternoon and departed with one small meteorite, the property of that establishment. He was seen by a guard rapidly leaving the building after having stood for some time over a case containing a number of similar exhibits. Dr. Hardman, curator, when questioned, could suggest no motive for such a theft. George looks up curiously from the paper. Julius is leaning back negligently, tossing from one hand to the other a small black stone. "Catch," he says. Clumsily, George catches it. "Why, I can't. It isn't right," he stammers. "That is my affair," snaps Julius. "The moral stigma attached to you by the transaction, that of receiving stolen goods, I suppose, is very small and theoretical. But nothing. That little thing is going to be put to real use instead of being eternally gaped at by successive a succession of idiots who don't give a damn what it is or where it came from. Now, I'm going. But wait a minute, Julius. What do you really think about this experiment? What is your honest opinion? I think it is a very promising line of inquiry and a very laudable task, praiseworthy but uncertain. What is life, you hope to find? How will you perceive it? Have you stopped to think that there may be life that we cannot observe through the senses developed on Earth, that does not obey the rules we have set up? I suppose you will use assimilation as a yardstick, a criterion by which to judge. You will look for something that increases itself at the expense of other things. A ticklish job at the best, because that something may be intangible, immeasurable, and altogether strange to you. In other words, you are looking for a new disease, one that you will not understand when you find it. What will it attack? What will it feed on? Who knows? Julius is gone then, an unsociable man. His visits were very rare and very short. George wished Julius were there now. He needed someone else to think for him. The little block, the food, was gone. Was there something that increased itself at the expense of other things? Had he succeeded? Was there life? The food was gone. But where was the something that increased itself? Under the glass, it must be. Everything had been sealed tight. In the pot on the window ledge was only a stalk. All the rest was black dust. He stares at it dully. Suddenly, a glimpse of something on the arm of his chair makes him start violently. It moves towards him, a dead gray thing splotched with black. He stares at it unbelievingly. It is his hand. George Dixon struggles to his feet and stands trembling in a wild panic. What is happening? He stares at his hands. Diseased. The word brings a new terror. Julius's words ring in his brain. Life is a disease. Something that increases itself at the expense of other things. He stares pleadingly at the glass jar. It was under the glass. It couldn't get out. Life that we cannot observe through the senses developed on Earth, that does not obey the rules we have set up. Some voice was repeating the words in his brain, that does not obey the rules. A horrible possibility flashes in his mind, and with a sob he blunders out of the room, desperately slamming the door. He needs help. He needs Julius. The telephone. Julius Humboldt is cursing softly as he grasps the receiver, but when he lays it down, his expression is very serious. The confused babble on the wire would have been meaningless to anyone else, but it galvanized him into action. Hurriedly, he sets about dressing and moving quickly about the tiny room. 5 minutes later, a shabby figure, he tiptoes down a very shabby staircase and emerges on 10th Avenue. Turning east, he runs halfway along 49th Street towards Broadway. Julius Humboldt is shabby because he is poor and because he does not care anyway. He is taciturn, perhaps a misanthrope, although more inclined to disregard his fellow man than to hate them. He has once been a professor of chemistry at Columbia University, but constant clashes with the authorities have mainly to do with his radical and unfounded theories had necessitated his resignation. He now lives precariously on a small annuity, seldom doing any work of a type calculated to increase his meager resources. He has few acquaintances and only one friend, young George Dixon. At Broadway, he plunges down the steps into the subway and boards a downtown train. Arriving at a Pennsylvania station, he learns that the next Port Washington train left at 4. Muttering to himself, he studied a timetable. Great neck, 4:40. He paces up and down the platform. The block is gone. It's got me. And then something about a geranium. George has certainly sounded strange, wild. There must be something really wrong. The block, he knew what the block was. George had written him a letter outlining his method of procedure. He had broken up the meteorite and pounded and pulverized it into a fine powder. This powder he had mixed with a combination of foodstuffs, animal and vegetable. The whole combination he had then compressed under great pressure into a small square block, which he had then subjected to various temperatures and various frequencies of ultraviolet rays. A simple, almost childlike performance, Julius reflected, yet direct and reasonable, characteristic of George. If this gave no results, he would try some other way. But wait, George had said the block was gone. Gone? Julius stood still, biting his lips. Stolen? Ridiculous. The thing had no value. The gates clattered open, and absent-mindedly he boards the train. Expensive, these Long Island trains, he thinks ruefully. For fellows like George who don't have to worry about money, it doesn't matter. It's got me. What could he have meant by that? His hands thrust deep in his coat pockets, his chin on his chest, Julius Humboldt ponders the matter as the train rumbles under the East River and out into Long Island. As the journey advances, he begins to feel more agitated. Several times he shakes his head violently and once gives a startled exclamation, causing a few other passengers in the car to turn amused eyes in his direction. Many frown slightly at sight of the gaunt, forbidding figure with the face that is by now very, very grim. The Great Neck station is deserted, and he sets out at a quick pace to cover the half-mile to George Dixon's house. The sky is overcast, and no signs of dawn are yet visible. The damp air envelops him like a black mist, depressing his spirit and seeming to increase the sense of heavy foreboding which he suffers. The large house, set back among the trees, is an ominous jet shadow as he approaches it up a winding path. Obsessed with a strange uneasiness, he walks on tiptoe, straining his eyes and ears. In another instant he is frozen into immobility by a laugh, a sudden high-pitched gurgling laugh. It rises and falls and ends in a sob. He gazes fixedly at the house. This is not George. What was that there? He slowly advances, mounting the steps, and lays his hand on the doorknob. From inside the house there comes a shrill cry, a crash, then silence. The door is unlocked. For a long time he stands very still, his head thrust forward. Then he slips quietly into the black interior. He remembers vaguely the plan of the place. To the left is the laboratory, to the right a sitting room, and straight ahead the stairway, flanked by a narrow hall leading to the back of the house. He moves to the left and feels along the wall to the laboratory door. A faint line of light shows beneath it. He knocks and waits, but there is no sound. Cautiously he pushes open the door. The room is untenanted. Light comes from a large globe in the ceiling. He advances across the floor, his eyes darting from right to left. He pauses over the table in the center and gazes thoughtfully down at a small heap of metallic dust under the jar. Pretty well cleaned out, he mutters. All gone. All right. Again he glances around. This time his eye is caught by the unusual appearance of a flower pot on the window ledge. It appears to be filled with something black. He walks over and digs into the surface with his finger. Underneath is dry earth. It is just a thin layer of powder on top. He purses his lips. A sound behind makes him wheel around and gaze into the hallway. Slowly there takes shape in the darkness there a crouching, mottled figure. It is a man, half naked, whose skin is a dead gray in color, splotched with black. It is staring at him with wide fixed eyes and creeping forward with a convulsive motion of the lower legs. All the hope goes out of him as he recognizes George Dixon. He curses. "George, in God's name, what's the matter?" Julius Humboldt has taken 3 quick steps forward, and the other leaps. He has a flashing glimpse of wide eyes, flaring nostrils, bared teeth, and ducks instinctively. The flying body strikes him a glancing blow on the shoulder and crashes full length on the floor. He stares at it, horrified. "George!" The prostrate creature screams and beats the floor with its fists. Humboldt recoils instinctively. "Mad!" he breathes through white lips. He advances gingerly and kneels down, placing a hand gently on the other's shoulder. There comes a quick, sharp snarl, and he snatches his hand violently from between the other's closing teeth. Again he leaps back and stands rigidly still. Hurried thoughts race through his brain. He will have to do something for George, and do it quick. A doctor? He frowns irritably. What will a doctor do? He doesn't want some fool messing around and making things worse. What will a doctor treat for? What is wrong with George? That is the question.